Condos have historically been an affordable entry point into premium waterfront real estate here in the state of Florida. But recent developments in insurance cost increases, state mandated inspection requirements have put strain on that affordability. Today, I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know for owning a condo in Florida for the year 2024. Right off the bat, we're going to take a look at condo ownership versus owning a house. And it's going to be less different if you're purchasing a condo for your primary residence in a community where the majority of ownership is primary residence. Now, the main difference is that in communities where you have people renting out their unit Airbnb, which is very prevalent in my part of Florida, the Florida Panhandle, Panama City Beach, all the way to Destin. This local area is very friendly to short term rentals and tourism. So, in these condos that have majority being rented out on these short term rental programs, the financing is going to vary. Here in the Florida Panhandle, you're going to have two flavors of condos that pop up fairly regularly: unwarrantable condos and condotels. Condotels are the harder, more restricted version to get financing for. This is with a higher population of short term rental units, and they typically have a front desk with a management company component on site. These are a little bit of a higher risk profile for banks simply because there's more investment activity going on the property versus primary user. The rates on these tend to be a little higher, and sometimes out of state banks flounder with being able to create the loan. Out of state banks, I've noticed, don't do well with condotels or unwarrantable condos. Basically, the warrantable condo is that primary user condo where the majority is end user. That's where they have their primary residence. Those type of condos are going to be similar to a primary residence on a house, but just because you're living in a condo full time doesn't mean that it's going to be a warrantable condo. There could be a bunch of vacation rental units being ran in a condo. Just because you want to live there doesn't automatically make it a warrantable, more favorable financing situation. The next consideration for the differences between condo and home ownership is the association piece. On a condo, the homeowner is responsible for everything from the studs in. The association is going to cover everything on the exterior and all the common areas, and there can be multiple aspects to an association. Typically, the association is led by an owner volunteer board, and there's typically a management piece to that that answers to the board. Now, that's a very unforgiving position. It's typically unpaid, purely volunteer, and those board members are in the middle of a lot of conflict, especially currently. But getting back to the difference of home ownership and condo ownership, you're going to have a more intensive association cost or association dues than you would in a residential neighborhood with a homeowners association. Now, the reason for that is you have collective maintenance on all the shared aspects of the building. You also, in most cases, here on the beach, in these condotels where you have a lot of amenities, pools, shared common area, you have the upkeep of all that area. So that's added into the budget. So the dues are typically higher on the condo side than you would see in a planned community for a single family residence for that end user. Okay, so we're going to continue discussing pros of owning a condo in Florida. And I know that might seem like an oxymoron right now with all the news, with rising insurance costs, rising association dues, but hear me out. So, condos, as I alluded to in the beginning of the video, are an affordable entry into premium waterfront real estate here in the state of Florida. The state of Florida, as you may have noticed, is a large peninsula. We have beaches all over the place. That's why they built so many condos. More Americans can afford a condo directly on the sand than the percentage of folks that can afford that single family residence on the sand. Beach houses directly on the beach with water views are very expensive from an insurance, construction standpoint, and just from a price standpoint too. They're more scarce because of the expense. Less of the population can afford them, so the price point is typically in the millions and restricted to the masses, where condos definitely more accessible. Additionally, the level of fortification on the modern condo build is going to be higher than what's able to be done on a single family residence. That's not to say that single family residence can't be built like a fortress with concrete and steel like a condo, but the economies of scale and the additional requirements for multifamily building code within close proximity to that coastal construction line. Coastal construction line just being a term for a geographic location that's close to the ocean that has higher level of building requirements because of impact of hurricanes or storms that could blow off the Gulf or the ocean, depending on where you are in Florida. So with that said, typically the level of fortification is going to be greater on that condo, and there's going to be more precautions taken for those storms that occasionally Florida gets in those hot months. Another benefit of owning a condo is going to be the level of amenities that can be installed. Again, stemming from that economies of scale, it's having hundreds of units vertical versus a single family residence. On these condos here in Panama City Beach, Destin, we're seeing lagoon style pools, lazy rivers, arcades, fitness centers, restaurants, tiki bars, all on site for guests and owners to enjoy. Some people may see the community aspect or shared nature of these amenities as a con versus a single family residence. But again, the cost of installing all those is more accessible because it's shared amongst a group of owners than putting that in a single family residence. You can do a lot more in a condo at scale and have it be very marketable to guests and owners versus what you could do with a single family residence. So the level of amenities creates that marketability that allows people that are using their condos as a second home to rent it out during the times that they're not using it and get rental income. And this income creates a layer of insulation against increasing costs from insurance and association dues. Where in South Florida, where there's more retirement communities that do not allow Airbnbs and short term rentals to just fully absorb those increased costs. So in areas like Destin, Panama City Beach, 30A, even out in Fort Walton Beach, there's a good amount of condos. You have a lot of second homeowners that live somewhere else that come here for a month during the winter or a couple months throughout the year and rent it in the time that they're not using it. And they are able to offset some of those costs that we're seeing due to the economic climate right now. Those renting owners are in a better position than those primary users that are living in a condo full time. So some food for thought. Moving on to cons of owning a condo in Florida. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the first thing that you probably heard about is the rising insurance costs. So I'm just going to go over the reasons why we're seeing that. As you know, Florida is subject to some pretty stormy weather. That stormy weather creates opportunity for certain contractors to come in and create work for themselves. And there has been a lot of fraudulent claims, especially with roofs on homes and even condos. That's a topic for another time. Florida is a hotbed for insurance litigation, and a lot of it stems from storm damage. It has the highest incident of fraudulent claims that end up in court than any other state in the country. That a lot has to do with the climate here. So that fact alone is pushing certain insurance providers out of Florida. In addition to those fraudulent claims, we have the hurricanes themselves. Hurricane Ian in 2022 decimated a very expensive area of South Florida, causing billions of dollars in damage. In 2018, we had Hurricane Michael to the east of Panama City Beach. Parts of Panama City proper and Mexico Beach had tremendous damage from the storm. These insurance companies have lost a lot of money, and the ones that can't hang have moved out of the state, creating a much thinner herd of insurance providers in the market, which is putting a lot of upward pressure on insurance prices. On condos, the owner covers insurance from the studs in. This is called a contents policy. Everything from the exterior, the common areas, all the amenities, the HOA or condo association has to purchase something called a master policy. And it's an umbrella policy that covers everything that I just mentioned. It's a more specialized product, and the herd of insurance providers that offer this is even thinner than your typical homeowner's policy. So with the shortage of providers for the master policy, it's putting upward pressure on those master policies, maybe a little bit on contents policies, but that master policy is really the component that has risen in the past year. The average condo in Florida has insurance policy has risen anywhere from 30 to 40% in 2023. This cost gets facilitated by the owners. Every year, the condo board has to budget for the expenses. So the master policy gets directly embedded into those dues. And there are many, many condos along the beach here locally and throughout the state of Florida that have seen increased HOA dues from 23 to 24 to account for the increases in the master policy insurance for the building. In addition to rising insurance costs, in 2022, the state of Florida passed Bill SBD 4, which requires buildings 25 years and older that are 3 stories and taller to get structural milestone inspections every 10 years if they hit that age point. Now, the structural inspection, it has to be performed by an architect or an engineer, and anything that they call out needing repairs from a structural standpoint has to be funded 100% by the association via the reserve study, via the reserve line item of their budget. Now, in older buildings that have a lot of deferred maintenance, this is definitely going to put upward pressure on association prices and even create the potential for a special assessment to cover the repairs. Now, as I mentioned, this bill has been known about since 2022. A lot of older buildings that fall within that 25-year age time frame have taken measures to start to work on these items prior to getting to the inspection. But buildings that are approaching that threshold of aging to 25 years are going to be looking down the barrel of this inspection. So that's definitely another layer of increased costs added to the insurance component, creates a more unfavorable environment and puts pressure on the cost of owning these condos here in Florida. In conclusion, those increased cost factors, insurance, association dues, reserve requirements mandated by the state via SBD 4 structural inspection are going to make the cost of ownership higher in the next coming years for condos. The pool of people that can afford or want to afford a condo is going to be lessened. The increased interest rates on condo loans is also going to lessen that pool of people that can afford a condo. With the increased supply of condos and lower demand from buyers, this is going to create more bargaining power for those opportunity-driven investors that are financially stable. They got a little bit of risk tolerance. They can put a bigger down payment down on a condo loan or potentially buy the condo cash. They can get into a premier location, a well-ran building, where a few years ago these units were very competitive with multiple offers and maybe only one unit was listed, if any. But now there's maybe 5 to 10 units in some of these buildings where you have a lot more selection. And that, over the next year to 2 years, I'm going to see as an opportunity for those specific investors into premium buildings that rent really well, that are ran well from an association standpoint in terms of keeping up with maintenance, balancing the budget, funding the reserve requirements. Over the next coming years, we may see some of the legislation that has recently passed within Florida to help curb some of the fraudulent claims with insurance that will in turn open the door to more insurance providers entering the state's network. We don't have any control over hurricanes or any of the weather events, but hopefully we can solve over the next few years the shortage of insurance providers and take some of the pressure off of these increasing rates. And I'm going to finish off with some tips for people that are in the condo market or have been considering a purchase, some things to look for in 2024. So the first action item is to do your homework. Make sure you're looking at the budget, that you're looking at the most recent meeting minutes. You're seeing the cost fluctuations from year to year. You have a good understanding of the financial position of that building. The second tip that I have is to consider purchasing a building that's newer than 25 years old. That will give you some time for the building to prepare itself for that structural inspection. There's going to be a race in those older buildings to make sure everything is in good shape for the milestone inspection for SBD4 at the end of the year. Having a few years to kind of know what to expect is definitely going to be an advantage. So I would recommend looking at a building that's newer than 25 years old. And then finally, I would consider purchasing a building that has less than 3 stories. I know this is like not a real condo, and there aren't as many directly on the sand. Typically, these type of buildings are across the street from the beach, but you do have some great townhome communities. I personally own a condo in a low rise. It's on the first floor, and there's one floor above me. These units are not going to be subject to SBD4 and have no requirements on structural milestone inspections. If you enjoyed this content, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. My name is Eric Lighton, Emerald Coast Abode, real estate agent on the Emerald Coast of Florida, part-time gopher at What's Up Beach Vacation Rentals. I appreciate you tuning in. Hope you're having an awesome day.